Hey folks, welcome back to Toby Talks. We're in a slightly different place today. Slightly different setup, slightly different everything, because for the first time ever, we have a guest. We have with us Caleb Welch from Client Minds. Are you happy to be here today?
I am.
Are you excited?
I've been looking forward to that.
Can't even stand yourself, can you?
Jumping out of my skin.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Because then it's going to make a mess and we're going to have to clean it up.
That's true.
And then I'm not going to scrub the carpet.
That's valid.
Okay, fair enough. So we are going to talk a little bit today about a concept that I think is kind of interesting and it's kind of appropriate given today's world about what makes a modern leader. Does that ring a bell? Does that hit a nerve?
It does.
A little bit. So when we talk about a modern leader as opposed to an antiquated or past tense leader, right? First thing I want you to do, including everybody watching and listening, is I want you to think about the hands down best leader that you have ever worked with. That could be a boss, it could be a mentor, it could be a coach, it could be a whomever, right? So take a second and find that person in your head.
You changed the game on me.
Okay. You got one?
Yeah.
Okay. Now imagine that same person. Could they walk into an environment tomorrow with a fully remote team on 4 continents, 7 time zones, and half of that team speaking in not their native language? Could they walk into that team and lead it effectively?
Like right out of the gate without any
Tomorrow?
No.
No. And I would bet that that's probably the vast majority of folks. Not that there's not folks out there that could do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may stumble a little bit, but that could do it effectively. And the reason for that is they were made for a different world. They were made for a different time. Not that it's not wrong or bad, but the world changed way faster than they were ready for and way faster than anyone ever expected it to.
I'll give you that for sure. Yeah. I guess the reason you threw me off is because I guess my experience allows me to tell you that I have people that probably could come close, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they would still need to know the job role and so they couldn't do it tomorrow. But I worked through some of the remote and national and global versions of that. So some of the people I could think of would have a skill set to it, but there'd still be a learning curve.
Right.
It's not a walk in tomorrow and do it.
And the learning curve, I mean, if we're talking about a technical learning curve, that's a whole one whole other animal. But
Sure.
if we're talking about the people management and the people leading skills, that's the big part of this.
Well, I guess maybe that'll help, right? Like
if we drill it down a little bit more.
Yeah, like define what modern leader means.
So the concept of modern leader is somebody who really has they've taken the antiquated concept of what leadership is or what leadership is supposed to be. And I don't say antiquated as a bad thing because that's the way it can kind of come across, and that's not my intent. But an antiquated concept where it was top down, it was hierarchical, right? And it was that classic thumb on the back of the employee or on the coworker or whatnot saying, you will do this and you will do that and you will do the next thing. And this is how you will do it and when you will do it and why you will do it. And it was very command and control centered, where that's how the world existed for hundreds of years, right? Of modern concept of society.
I think that's fair.
Where today's manager, today's leader is a lot more focused on the person that they're leading as opposed to the task that they're trying to do.
So people management over task and job management.
Correct. It involves a couple different pieces where you've got to dig in a little bit and allow the space for trust.
Yeah.
So it's a trust-based leadership component where the modern leader is setting with the person they're leading or the team or whatever the scenario is. They're going through and they were establishing a clear set of goals and a clear set of deadlines and a clear set of deliverables and a clear understanding on both sides of the coin about what is going to happen, who's doing it, when, how, etc. And then giving that person the freedom to trust that they will do what they have agreed to do in the manner they've agreed to do it and by when. So it's that clear expectation and the clear deadline of when that needs to happen, and then get the heck out of their way. Right? So you hire the best person for the job. You have a honest discussion about what the job, the task, the whatever it is involved, what we're going to do, when we're going to do it by, and then let them do it.
Yeah.
and be a resource
Sounds like
to
a Tina Fey quote. I hire smart people and I get out of their way.
yes. Yes,
Right.
is hire there's a guy who I used to do a lot of scouting work with, and one of his favorite lines was, "Hire the best person, and I'll keep it clean, right? But get out of their way,"
Yeah.
And that's what that didn't exist over the past, I don't know, half century, if, to kinda make it a little less deep in time, right?
Well, although it didn't exist, let me ask this question though. Like, I hear you. I think trust existed, but not in this way. So I'm trying to walk a fine line here.
Mhm.
But is this a generational problem or is it something broader? Because trust exists. I understand we didn't run it back then. Or are you saying, hey, this is totally generational and that's the way things were, so we need to adapt? Or is there something wider than just the generational gap that we're trying to close here on this?
I think there is a lot broader conversation, but one of the biggest parts of this is is the generational piece, right? Where
Yeah.
if you look at today's workforce, I know we're gonna date this, but now in the first part of 2026, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at the modern workforce today that exists. You
Mm-hmm.
have the most broad piece of generational component that we've had in modern time, right? In the past, let's say all 50 years, right? So you've got boomers that are still in the workplace, right? Especially the younger ones that haven't hit that retirement piece yet, right? So you've got boomers out there. You've got a bucket full of my people, right? My Gen X people, right? You've got tons of millennials and all of their groups. And we now have the next gen, right? The Gen Zs coming into the workforce, right? Some have been around for a little bit longer, right? And all four of those groups were came of age during different time, well, obviously different chronological times, but different mindset eras, right? Of how the world
Yeah.
worked and what was expected when you got up out of bed in the morning and put your shoes on and got in the car and drove to wherever it is that you're driving to, right? To go put your time in, right? During that part of the day. So the world expected one thing and everyone expected something else. And then finding where those disconnects happened, right? And how the average person and in that cohort right now, and again, I say average person, there's going to be exceptions to every rule, right? There's going to
Sure.
be the old soul millennial who still thinks it's 1962,
Yeah.
or there's also the older Gen X or even some of the younger boomers, right, who still think that they're 12 or 20, right, and can go do all the things. And trust me, you will sit and realize that your knees and your back and your hips are not going to let you do all the things that you used to do,
Yep.
because you'll wake up in the morning and realize that things hurt that you didn't know that you had.
This is true.
So that's the physical and the fun part of it. But
Right.
the way the relationship with the employee and the concept of work, right, has changed
Mhm.
dramatically, right? And now when the pandemic came, that just spurred and put fuel on the fire, right? It just dumped a big bucket of gasoline on the fire that was already burning, right?
Yeah.
For pre-2020, with the concepts of hybrid work or remote work or the flexibility and the flex scheduling and all of those things. And we like to use a lot of buzzwordy things, things like work-life balance. And a lot of times you hear that phrase and people do what you just did and roll your eyes at me, right? And that's not been too snarky, right? 'Cause
I know.
you did, right?
I
You
did,
hear,
but I did it for probably a different reason than most people do, but I
right,
understand. I
because you
understand
hear that term.
all the time.
Yes, and a lot of times the folks maybe on the more advanced age of that spectrum, right, of that
Mhm.
bucket, the older boomers, they hear the term work-life balance because that was not a thing.
Yeah, they
It
don't understand it. It wasn't a
it's
term that was used,
no, it was
and
not.
it was not a focal point for attraction of employee.
No. Well, and you think about the way that the world worked, let's just call it in the 1950s, 1960s, right? You had two broad classifications of worker. You had your blue collar worker and you had your white collar worker. And the white collar worker got up in the morning, right, and put on their short sleeve. We'll just use a guy as an example, right? Put on there because most of the women were at home, right? It was
Well, yeah.
June Cleaver, right?
Yes.
Sitting at home, right? Making sure that Beaver had dinner or lunch when he came home your Nasrol at 3:30 in the afternoon, right? So you put on your white dress shirt, right, that had was short sleeve only, right? So you had your Andy Stipowitz look going on there. I'll date myself a little bit with that reference as well. But yeah, and you put on your tie, right? Or it's Michael Douglas from the Falling Down movie where he's got his briefcase, he's walking down the street, right? And you got in the car and you drove to wherever it is you're working and you started at 9 and you had your coffee and you did all the things, right? And then at 5 o'clock, you came home. and then you did whatever it is you were doing that night, right? And there was zero thought in that process. It was rinse, wash, repeat every day for 30 plus years. And the expectation was at the end of those 30 years that you were going to have a pension and you were going to be all happy puppies, rainbows, and kittens for the rest of your life, right? Versus the blue collar worker who, depended upon if they were on A shift, B shift, or C shift, or afternoons, days, afternoons, midnights, right? Depending upon what you want to
Or
call
they
it.
were working swing shift,
Oh, that's always the fun one,
right?
right?
But like, yeah, your point is
Yeah, you got
you had a whole different slew of problems because are you on mornings? Are you on midnights? Are you on afternoons? And do you have to rotate those? And what does that look like?
and that was, but this all comes back to the schedule. There was no balance. Like
No.
that was what you did,
Mhm.
right? There was no phone in your pocket where someone can get a hold of you 24/7, right? You had the home phone number and that was it, right? And maybe if you were that white collar worker, you got to put your work phone number or extension on some forms for whatever, right? And if you got a non-work phone call during work hours, that was as much balance as you were going to get, right? Where life could come in.
Yeah.
And that was the way the world worked. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's the way it was,
Yeah.
right? So then that gradually shifted as the United States economy and the society changed from more of a build things, an industrial based economy to a service based economy and then an experience based economy. And that's a whole nother conversation with service to build to experience. And we can
Mhm.
spend 4 hours on that, but that's a topic for another day.
Right.
But you look at how that changed. And in today's world, people are busier with whatever under the sun
Yeah.
than they've ever been before, right? And it's finding the amount of time in the day to get all of those things done. And with the concept of balance today is I don't care when you get the job done, as long as you're getting the job done, right? So if
Right.
you are
That's the dangerous slope.
it is a sticky slope, right? And that's where you have that trust and you have that clear conversation between the manager, the leader, whatever you want to call them, and the employee, the doer.
Yeah.
That conversation way at the front of this, that you've both agreed on what that outcome is going to be.
Yes.
Right. And as long as everyone has agreed on, hey, we're doing this, that, and the other by then, by this date, right? And these are the milestones that may exist up leading up to, or whatever the scenario is, where you trust that they're going to do that right now. And if they don't do that, if it doesn't get done, then that's a whole different conversation. That's a conversation now about, well, okay, we agreed on X, Y, and Z, and why did we get A, B, and C instead? Right. And it's, oh, well, the project requirements changed. Okay. I understand. Right.
Mhm.
Or the client didn't give me the data points they needed to and do the deliverable by the deadline. Okay. All of those things make sense. If it's you just didn't get it done, that's a performance question, which you would have had in any other scenario anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess so I hear all of what you just said, but then I have this question in my brain of like, okay, I get that society changed and I understand that it is a broader issue, but it is generational. But then it triggers my brain to go, well, is it that or are we talking about the digital side of things? Are we talking about
Well,
technology? Is this just get better at managing new systems and
the tech piece, and we'll go into a little bit of the tech stuff, like that was one of my bullet points to bring up later, right?
yeah.
But we can do it now, right? But being using the term modern leader, I think a lot of folks think just what you just said is, well, this is all about I know how to use the right tool, right? I got the right clackety clack,
That's why I'm
or the right little electronic rectangle that's going to go in my pocket, or the right thing to clip on my ear, or the Google glasses that never quite made it, right? Which I was excited.
now there's meta glasses.
I don't know. I was one of the
Yeah.
first Google Glass, like, here's my $1,500, and then it never shipped. But that whole different problem, right? I got excited. I still want my George Jetson flying car, but
Yeah.
whatever. So you got me sidetracked on that. But
Sorry.
when you think about the tech piece, now being a leader in the modern era, right? Versus modern, whatever you want to call it, it's not about having all of the tech answers. You don't have to be the most technologically savvy person in the room. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a this, that, the other thing. You don't have to be the Salesforce guru or the Jira, whatever they call their top tier person, right? You don't have to be all of that. But what you do have to have is a good fluency in the base of what all of these things do and how to use them to coordinate work, right? So it's using the
Mhm.
right tool in the toolbox,
Yeah.
that scenario. So, and whatever system that your team in the modern knowledge workspace, right, in the office
Mhm.
space, whatever you want to call it, whether you're whatever communication platform you're using, whether it's a Slack or a Jira or a WebEx or a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams, right? Like we all hear that ringtone in our head of any one of those and you just cringe a little bit. But whichever one of those it is that you're using, they all do effectively the same thing. Some are better than others for one, and when this is not a sales pitch for any one of those things. Whatever that platform is knowing how to use it and how your team is going to use it and how to use it effectively to maximize the productivity of the team and getting the task done.
Okay.
Now, the other part of that, and this goes back to the whole distributed team, remote work, all of those types of things, is communication and collaboration has changed dramatically, at least
Absolutely.
since of when we'll call it the plague, right? When
Mhm.
when
Yeah.
COVID hit, right? And all of a sudden, folks that you may have had those one or two folks that work remote, or they might have been on a consultant basis
Sure.
or something along those lines. And that was a conference call every day or a go to meeting or a whatever tool that was being used. But then all of a sudden, March of 2020 came and everyone's working in their pajamas
Well, yeah.
in the spare bedroom or at the kitchen table, or, I was on a folding card table in the family room with orange extension cords running out to the nearest to the nearest
Mhm.
plug to make everything work and realizing quickly that that was not going to be as conducive as it was before because I don't just get to walk down the hall and darken someone's doorway and ask a question.
Yeah, there's that.
But with that and the increase in how accepted remote has become, right? It's enabled companies and teams and groups to hire for talent as opposed to hire for geography,
Okay.
where now you may have had that one outlier that was in a different time zone, right? But now your entire team could be 3 hours apart, 4 hours apart, 5 hours apart, right? If you're going to get to a transnational company, like as an example, one of my devs is in the United Kingdom. So I think it's an 8 hour. I'd have a sticky note on the monitor so I can remember when I don't call her, right?
Mm.
But of what the time zone change is. So now all of a sudden that communication and collaboration becomes asynchronous. It's not a pick up the phone and call whomever and have a simultaneous conversation about whatever the task is. Now, don't get me wrong. That simultaneous conversation is going to be significantly more efficient in almost every time, right? Because what could have been a 7 hour back and forth WebEx chat or a 7 hour back and forth Slack chat or whatever it is we're talking about, or a
Mhm.
bunch of emails going back and forth, right? Or heaven forfend the text messages with your phone, with your
Sure.
thumbs, right? Could have been a 10-minute phone call or a 10-minute Zoom meeting or a 10-minute whatever. But that's the way that the bulk of work happens now because of that time shift,
Yeah.
right? Where a good leader needs to understand that, well, that's not going to be the norm. The norm is not going to be that weekly team huddle that happens in the break room at 7 o'clock on Fridays, right? Or
Mm.
whatever it is. And I'm not saying there's not still a place for all of those things, because there is. But the fact that the bulk of the communication and collaboration that happens in a team today is going to be asynchronous. It's going to be written, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's also become a skill that the members of the team, the worker bees, right? The
Mhm.
folks doing the thing, whatever tasks, wherever part in the food chain or the process diagram that they fall, is people have had to relearn that skill
Yeah.
of written communication and being clear in that communication and describing everything that you want it to be. And in a lot of organizations or in a lot of fields that they didn't lose that skill because they had to write, product requirements or whatever it was always, right? So
Right.
that wasn't as much of a learning curve as it was in some organizations or business industries as others. But others, you had to learn that skill again. And then a lot of folks then had to learn how to read again, which I know that sounds kind of bad. I'm not trying to bounce us back to 3rd grade, right? Or whenever it is
Sure.
that you learn how to read anymore. I can't remember. But I'm not trying to see this as a negative thing, where we had to relearn that skill of how to read a written block of text and understand what the sender of that message was trying to convey. So you have to read it critically and be able to pluck out the pieces that you need and then ask clarifying questions. right? So that modern leader, if we circle this way back to the tech question, right, needs to be able to understand that these are all tools, right? And it's
Right.
going to help enable the communication and make it a lot easier for that team to work.
So if we were to like cut it down to maybe 3 concrete examples, right? And you've mentioned some of them. So asynchronous communication,
That's right there is honestly the biggest piece.
and then I heard a little bit of conversation about both of these: data literacy and AI and automation, right? Like understanding the tools kind of goes to those 2 pieces as well, right?
It does. And let's break those. Those are two very different things, right? So if
Right.
you look at data analysis, right, is you don't have to be the data person on your team and running all the analysis and doing all of the math, right? One, there's software that will do the bulk of that math, right, for you.
Y
No one's sitting there with a 10 key anymore and doing the math by hand. I mean, if you are, then we can have a conversation about efficiency, or
Sure.
maybe you just have an affection for your 10 key. I finally got rid of the one on my desk that's been there since I was an undergrad.
Okay.
So that thing's been around for a while. It finally went because I mean, I couldn't, it was so dim. I couldn't even see it anymore. I finally had to part ways with my Sharp. But either way, you're not doing it by hand. So we could have not knowing how to do all of the math, right? But it's being able to ask the right questions. That's
Yeah.
the key part with the data analysis piece is being able to ask the right questions of what do we need to measure? Are we measuring the right things, right? But then also having the decisions in place of what do we do when the data tells us X. So a good example of that is let's say you have a dashboard, right, on whatever system that you're using, right? And it's got a dial, right? And
Mhm.
if you picture every single one of us that drives a vehicle, right? There's a dial somewhere on an instrument panel, whether it's a vertical bar chart, right? Or it's a little spinny thing that goes up and down, whatever it is, that has the fuel gauge or the battery remaining, depending
Mhm.
on what kind of vehicle you have, right?
Yeah.
And you already have a set decision point of what do you do? Because at some point, it's going to not move anymore, right?
Mhm.
You are going to be stuck on the side of the freeway at some point if you don't respond to that piece of data. Whether you're one of those folks that plays the E game, right? And
Yep.
you only have to learn, I will say, as a former person who played the E game, you only have to learn that lesson once before you're stuck on the side of the freeway with no gas can in the trunk. And this is also the day before cell phones. So you just stand there until some poor schlub hopes to stop and help you, or you decide to walk to the nearest BP station. So you have that decision point of, hey, when I get to a quarter tank, I stop at the wherever on the way home and or on the way to or whatever your day is and put more fuel in the car, right?
Right.
Or my battery hits X, I stop at the nearest supercharger and I plug the car in. Whatever the scenario is, right?
Sure.
So, but back to using that same piece of data is what do you do when the data hit tells you a certain thing? So having those decisions in place and then executing on them. So
Mm.
back to your question about data analysis, you don't have to be the person doing the math, right?
Right.
But you have to be the person interpreting the data.
And you have to be the person that knows what those decisions are and need to be
Yes.
made, and implementing I guess, a point. You're
Mhm.
implementing, you are the person, and the modern leader, you are the person implementing when the data shows these things, don't care who's looking at it.
Correct.
I made the decision, these things are going to happen.
Correct. And a lot of that can help be preventative maintenance, honestly. And a couple weeks ago, we did a whole episode on data driven decisions. So, Yuval, you can go back and check that one out from a few weeks ago. But it's already having those decision points that are pre-established. It takes all of the fluff out of the data review meeting, right? Because
Yeah.
now that 90-minute meeting to look at the charts and look at the analysis and look at the things and say, "Ooh, look, I made it a pretty color this week. Boy, here's your cookie," right?
Right.
But we've already decided those things. We know that if our let's just say we're manufacturing widgets and our defect rate hit a certain percentage, right? And
Mhm.
we're measuring those because things don't always work according to plan, right? And we know that if we hit more than X percent, we do this. We stop the production line and do a review of the past 5 defects, maybe. Or we hit, let's say it's even sooner in the process, we may be more proactive with it and we hit a certain other threshold, where we just have a team huddle and say, well, why is every 10th widget coming off the line got a broken corner? Well, maybe the corner maker machine, it has a loose wheel, whatever the scenario is, right? So it's already pre-deciding that data. So you don't have to be the data analysis person, but you have to know what information you need to make a business decision. What does your team need to work effectively? And then hire the right person to find that information for you.
Gotcha.
Right. And then to go back to your AI piece,
That's yeah, what I was gonna say.
I mean,
How does that tie in with AI and
it,
automation?
so you don't have to be the super Claude genius, right? You don't have to have a entire server bank of Claude bots or open claws or whatever you want to call them running on Mac Minis and on a wall somewhere. I mean, not saying that's not a bad thing, right?
Right.
But you're going to need some budget to make that happen. But is knowing how the members of your team or the folks that you're working with, what efficiencies can they pick up with AI? Now, AI is going to and has replaced people, right? Period. End of story. Now, the big part of that is this is Toby's personal opinion. I don't think there's been as many headcount reductions, and that's a nice way to say layoff, that have been AI driven as the world would like you to think it has.
I
So
would
if you
agree with
look
that.
at the talking heads on CNBC or on it, pick your whatever your financially centered or business centered broadcast news or talking head is,
Sure.
right? That you look at the announcements that come out of the large companies. I'm not talking about the 200 employee shop. I'm talking about the 10,000 employee shop, right? Where hey, we our third quarter results are in, and we were able to reduce headcount by AI implementation by X% or X number or whatever. Well, you have to read the entirety of that announcement and dig into those quarterlies as well, because a lot of the layoffs didn't come because of AI. The layoffs came because they needed to cut headcount anyway. And we've just used the also adaptation of some AI pieces in our business model at the same time to justify or help explain away the reductions in force.
It's almost like usually back in the day, we talk about generation, we'll talk about
Mhm.
there was always a fall guy.
That yes, there was, right?
There was always a fall guy or
A lot of
always
the
a
production
fall
or
reason.
finishing department, it's his fault, right? And he's getting the blame. Oh,
AI is becoming the blame for some of the already problematic or financial
yes.
decisions that are being
Or
made.
correct. Or companies staffed up and staffed up and staffed up because demand for in certain industries
Sure.
was skyrocketing. And they may have overstaffed a
Right.
little bit, or they overestimated how many people they were going to need. Right.
Yeah.
And now we're having to cut some folks out. And I'm not saying there have not been more rote automation knowledge work jobs that have not been replaced. I am not saying that. That has absolutely happened, right?
Right.
But if you look at the person who looked at this, if we're going to talk about knowledge work or office work, right? AI is not going to replace the physical manufacturing piece, right? That's going to be a robot. That's a whole nother animal, right?
Sure.
But if we're talking strictly about the knowledge piece, right? So if we look at accounting and bookkeeping functions as an example, if I can then take a all of my inbound invoices that come in as an example, right? And if I can have a tool that takes those in and ingests those, and most AI agents in today's world can recognize what an invoice looks like,
Sure.
right? And
Yes,
if
they
it
can.
queue that up for processing, and you've got another one that looks for outliers, right? And all these different things. Well, I no longer have to have somebody physically opening the mail, right? Opening the bill that come
Mm.
and unfold it, right? And go through and read the thing with a ruler and a check mark and a magnifying glass and whatnot, and do all that and then process it to then write a check. And I don't have to go put checks in the printer, physically put them in the printer, right? And then when they come out, I got to fold them and attach them to the thing and stuff them in an envelope and then put a stamp on the envelope and take it to the post office, right? Now, those jobs don't have to happen anymore,
Right.
right? So we've got automate a lot of those things. And there's a lot of other pieces where AI can help either automate a task, right? But it can also be used to reduce the amount of time that the human needs to complete the task.
Yeah.
So that can either let me use that human for more things, more deep things, right?
Yeah.
And additional work, or just reduce my time to market, right? From the time. So if I go to the software world where I live most of the day, right? Where our devs have embraced this, right? And there was some pushback at the beginning, and
Yeah.
I'll be honest, right? But they've embraced this now, and they can go faster. So our time from an initial feature request or a bug fix to the time it's on the truck and out the door with the consumer has dropped dramatically. We're talking months of reduced time, right? And it's also helped pick up the accuracy piece, right? There's not as many bugs because we can AI pair program, right? We can have the AI do some code review, or we can use humans that are still there because the human piece is still an important component to this, where the AI isn't going to help establish customer relationships, right? The AI chatbot can certainly respond to certain easy onboarding or not onboarding, easy support requests of, hey, where do I make this setting change? Okay, well, the AI is going to know, okay, you go to click here, click there on the menu and click the third thing down. Okay, that's a pretty easy response for the chatbot. And how many of us that think that those chatbots that we interact with online from wherever, anywhere from Amazon to the grocery store, right? That a lot of folks still think that's a human. It's not a human. You're interacting with AI. You just don't know it.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing to the number of people that think there's a person behind that little annoying bot. Well, there's a picture of a person.
Yeah.
That's not an actual person there. I got to tell you. But either way, so it's all about using and acknowledging what we can use that tool, right? That AI tool in the toolbox, what we can use that for to help streamline and make the process more efficient.
So you're talking about the AI, and you just said it perfectly. Is like there's still a human piece to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to address that, or at least in my opinion, we need to address it. Is like, when do you get to the straightforward human connection role? Like, what's the line there?
The human piece, honestly, from the leadership perspective, has to get moved clear to the top, way to the beginning, right? It honestly has to, um, because you still need to interact with the folks on your team, right? Whether it's again, if it's an employment scenario or it could be a volunteer nonprofit type thing, whatever the scenario is, if you can't build trust and you can't model that a little bit of vulnerability, that you are not the be all end all, right? People they're not gonna respect you. They're not going to follow, right? I'm not gonna follow a leader who barks the orders at me. That's just not gonna happen, right? And that ties back to the generational piece and all the things we talked about already, right? All of these things talk about that. But if you can't establish that trust component at the front of the process, right? And I mean, we could open the I don't want to use the term DEI because that's become a politically incorrect word
Sure.
to use today, right? But we have to embrace the folks that come to the party,
Yes.
right? And everyone has a bunch of baggage. We all come with different kind of baggage, right? And I'm not saying baggage necessarily is a bad thing, but we're all from different backgrounds, different this, different that, different the next thing, right? So it's being able to take and realize that, hey, these are the folks that I have, right? These are the folks that have come to the party with me. So let's bring everyone along at the same pace, right? There's a proverb that I'm a fan of, and I can't quite remember where it came from, but it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So it's bringing everybody along on the party with you, right? So some of those folks, like for example, if we're talking about how do we organize that collaborative team meeting, whether it's an in-person thing or on a Zoom call or whatever, is you've got folks out there that are naturally more extroverted, right? Or more enthusiastic contributors to the team. We'll call it that. Right? But there are some folks that, dependent upon their background or their cultural background or where they came from or their past experience in life, where you don't speak until spoken to, right? Or if you contradict somebody who is in a more senior role than you are shunned, right? You just
Right.
don't do that, right?
Because it's disrespectful or
all
it crosses a cultural
crosses
line.
a line that you don't do, right? And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just that's the world, right? So it's being able to bring all of those folks along, and you have to find ways to include everybody in that conversation. So
Do you think that what you're talking about right now is a form of empathy, or is empathy separate from this?
a little bit of both, right? But I mean, if we just want to focus on empathy, right?
Yeah.
And that's another one of those terms that a lot of people like to toss around, and we roll our eyes at it.
We don't,
And
because nobody uses it.
nobody uses it, and nobody thinks about what it actually is.
I shouldn't say nobody. Lots of
Well,
people do understand
that's
it. But
fair enough.
the reason that people roll their eyes is because the people that roll their eyes don't understand it.
Correct.
They don't know how to incorporate it, but they like the idea behind it, so they write it as a core value.
Correct.
We have empathy.
It's on. Yeah, it's on the poster in the lobby.
So the thing that I'm struggling with though is what you're explaining about the human connection and including everyone that's coming to the party is that sounds like empathy. Empathy is one of those words that I think are used as a fancy core value. How does empathetic leadership show up day to day?
So number one, it's rare, right? And a lot of people it's one of those things where you know it when you see it, but you can't explain it. So true empathy, Toby's personal opinion, right? My worldview on this
Sure.
is it's being curious enough to ask people about their past experiences, understand their past experiences and where they're coming from and why before responding to it. So it's knowing enough to say, "Hey, let's talk about the why whatever it is, right? Let's talk about this, right? And let's figure out how to make this work best for both of us." And doing that in a way that again brings everybody along to the party with us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's it's being able to recognize that either, hey, this person is maybe they're struggling with how to communicate or be part of the team, right? Or maybe it's the way that I am at this point. If I'm an over extroverted rah rah sis boom bah cheerleader type leader, some people don't respond well to that. So it's also having the self awareness to be able to say, hey, maybe I need to change a little bit about how I am interacting with you to break you more comfortable and bring you along with the party.
Salad.
Did that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
Did that get where you were going?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. If I were to put a takeaway around from that, it's not just empathy, but tying human connection in with empathy sounds like there's three kind of big takeaways, right? It's asking better questions, it's paying attention to what people don't say.
That's the key. That's the key right there. Is picking up on the cultural cues, or
Right.
just the nonverbal cues.
Because like we talked, there's a culture where that just may be a thing for them,
Mhm.
right? Like they just were taught that. And maybe I don't want to spend any time on that, but it might just be a self-limiting belief, right? We haven't even got into self-limiting beliefs, but maybe that's a part of it. And then it's really on the leadership. Then the last takeaway that I kind of, the three is you need to know your people.
Yes,
Like, if you know your people, you have less of that worry or concern of that cultural difference, or you don't have to pay attention as closely and as detailed because you've spent time knowing the person.
correct.
You've you've already built that detailed knowledge back into your brain when you go to lead.
Absolutely. It's
So, how do you connect that then to retention and talent and like wrapping those the takeaways seem like that brings the humanity
and
angle back to a
it
competitive
it
advantage,
does. It
right?
does. And the organizations and leaders that are out there in the world today and then in the very near future that get this part right are going to absolutely win the talent war. Right? Because folks today have just an unprecedented amount of one knowledge
Mhm.
and I want to phrase this, the knowledge of and the willingness to make a change if the change is necessary, right? So it's not the norm anymore where I go when I get a job the day out of high school, the day out of graduate college, or whatever the scenario, whether I go to the service or whatever it is, and I get a job and I worked there for 30 years, right? People change jobs, but they change like I change socks. So the societal change, right, to being able to have that not be tied to it. Now that's a whole different conversation about loyalty and all that kind of, but it's a double-edged sword, right? So, but folks have in today's world, they have access to the knowledge, right, of what their market value is and why they might be a better fit somewhere else,
That's
right?
true.
So, folks, if this goes back to the generational piece and everything else we've already talked about, is we don't have that desire to just sit in the corner and take it anymore, right? The members of your team, right, if you don't make them feel like they're valued,
Mhm.
and they need to actually be valued. This is not a surface, a surface fake component, right? This has to
Can't be.
exactly. It has to be genuine or it doesn't work,
Right.
right? Or that our folks are going to see through that after about 2 minutes. So it's having the ability to acknowledge when there's an issue, right? And the desire to go deeper into that issue if it's there, right? And like you said earlier, is know your people, right? And know when you can push, if push is required, right?
Mhm.
Because maybe there is a deadline and we've had a bunch of things go wrong and we just need to power through it. Right. And there are times, I know that sounds counterintuitive to everything we've talked about for the past however long we've been sitting here. But there are some times where you're just going to have to grind it out and it needs to get done. Or there's some unplanned crisis that shows up on a random Thursday. Right.
Sure.
We got to grind through it and we're going to figure it out. Right. But it's not doing that all the time. So you have to know when you can push. Right.
Mhm.
And when you also have to pull. Right.
Yeah.
When someone might be a little stuck in the muck or whatever, you're gonna have to pull them out, right? You're gonna have to pull them along with and bring them along with the team. So
Yeah.
it's a balancing act. And the companies and the leaders, like I said, that get this right will win the war for talent. Period. End of story.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'll let you kind of wrap up in your, this is your show anyway. But I think what I take away from some of this is just the idea of, I think there's a mixed bag of people out there that believe that it's solely generational or it's solely technology
Mhm.
or it's solely this or it's solely that. And I don't think there's enough people looking at the broader scope of this and going, it's a piece of just about every one of
Yes, it
those.
is.
And if you don't address the specifics inside of that piece, you're not going to win any battle, whether that's the talent battle, whether that's the success battle, whether that's the great leader battle, because when you fine tune that into one area and think that that's the end all say all, you've already lost before you even got started
Correct.
because you've missed every other piece of this that goes into.
Yes, you need to look at it holistically,
Yeah.
right? So to tie that together, it's not a skill gap, right, from the leader's perspective.
Yeah.
It's not a, I need to learn how to do this thing with the clackety clacker or this thing with the hammer or the whatever, right?
Right.
It's not a skill gap, it's a mindset gap. And
Agree.
the nice thing about mindset gaps compared to skill gaps is they're a lot easier to close.
Yeah.
That skill gap may take me 6, 8, 10 months to learn how to do that thing,
Mhm.
right? Or to be proficient at doing that thing or to be an expert at that thing.
Correct.
But the mindset gap, that just takes me realizing that, hey, I need to get my head out of my whatever and move along.
Yeah, I think, because I love talking about mindset and I do it inside of, I mean, half my business is titled that, right? Client mind.
Yeah, it is.
Ideally, what it is I like to get into people's minds and help them open up different perspectives because I think that mindset can be one of the most powerful tools you can use. Issue becomes you have to be willing and open to being self-aware enough to call yourself out, and that's hard to do.
It is. And you've got to be able to check that ego at the door.
Yep.
Right. And if you can't do that, then we're not ready to have this conversation yet.
Correct.
So, but you bred it hit it perfectly with the self awareness component, right? And digging in deeper into the why, right?
Mhm.
Because it just takes you waking up on a Thursday to say, you know what? Today's the day, right? I'm making, and this is like any behavioral shift or habit change, or, I mean, how many people, I know we're a little late in the year to talk about New Year resolutions at this point, but how many people get all excited about getting healthier on January 1st? And it's okay, well, I'm going to wait until I have all that whatever on New Year's Eve, right?
Mhm.
All that pork and sauerkraut and all the things that you typically consume. And then I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to eat a salad, right? And then by January 10th, all that goes for naught, right? So, but you wake up one morning and say, I am going to do this.
Right.
So whether it's that physical habit of getting whatever the scenario is, right?
Sure.
Or, I'm going to finally tackle that room in the corner of the garage that's been piled up to the ceiling for 10 years, right? Whatever.
Mm.
You're just going to have to break it down and do it. It's the same thing with mindset is you got to wake up one morning and say, you know what? Today's the day.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do it, then we're not ready to move yet.
Yeah. I think it goes back to that whole saying that I use is, until you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you won't change.
That is 100% true.
So in business, until you hit some form of frustration that you're so frustrated you can no longer be frustrated,
Right. Where you have to do something.
you're
about
not
it.
going to make that change. But when you do, it is a mindset, not a skills gap. And you can change it faster than you think, but you've got to start putting actions into play.
Correct. And whatever that pain point is, maybe it's after the third person leaves.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, hopefully you would realize this before the first person leaves.
You would think.
But whatever, whether it's continual turnover, right, or it's customer churn, right, or whatever metric it is that that's gonna finally push that button,
Mm.
whatever that piece of data is is saying, okay, we're gonna do it right now. You might work for a company that someone's going to make that decision for you, and somebody higher up on the org chart is going to all of a sudden sometimes realize that, hey, maybe you're the problem.
Yeah.
And they're going to fix your problem for you.
Real fast.
Right. And then now hopefully that's your wake up call that really, hey, maybe I don't need to be a dinosaur anymore. Right. T-Rex has had his day. It's, I mean, unless you're in Jurassic Park. Right. And then we'll move on to something else. But
Yeah.
so we covered a lot of ground today. And this was kind of a fun experience, right? To have a two-person style on this is something new for me, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully the folks, listening along at home or in their car or wherever it is they find their podcast at, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully you all found some value in this as well. And hopefully that our listeners, right, whether this is your listeners or my listeners or all the above, right? Hopefully some folks found some value in this conversation and maybe had a couple little light bulbs flicker, if not
Yeah.
turn on and glow bright red or bright orange or whatever, that, hey, maybe I need to move along with the world a little bit, right?
Mm.
Otherwise, the world's going to leave me behind.
That's right. Absolutely.
So, well, anyway, folks, thanks for spending some time with me today. My name's Toby Hoy, as always. This is Toby Talks, and we'll see you on the next one.